So, good morning everyone. Welcome to this exciting day of new Agda Talks and Hacking Conk. So, first talk today is by Jean Leo. He will talk about counterpoint analysis and synthesis.
All right, thank you. All right, so this is something I presented at Farm and at the last ICFP. Wasn't there, so I recorded it, and I encourage you to watch it. I tried to make it entertaining. I won't go over what I did there. I mean, I kind of will, but it's worth seeing on its own. But I won't assume that you watched it either. So to give you some background, so I've been working for a while in Agda on this music tools library, which was kind of inspired by Utopia, but I wanted to do it my own way and kind of take advantage of Agda independent types. Going back to the Agda meeting in Tokyo, I got Yu to work on this with me. We did this counterpoint by construction, which was also presented at Forum in Berlin. She presented it there. And we basically encoded counterpoint rules, which I'll explain a little bit later, in Agda's type system. And then she composed some counterpoint, and then it would check to make sure it was okay. It actually caught some errors that she had, so she was impressed that it worked. And I could play this one. Maybe some people have heard this before. This is we created some counterpoint against the Yamate Senjima, which is one of the train lines. So if you've been to Tokyo, you may have heard it before. And then we also, during the pandemic, we did a couple music videos together. I don't see Phil Wadler's not here, but he was actually one of the stars of the 2021. He got this thing about monads, and then we did another one for ICFP 2021. And then for Farm, forget what it was, maybe it was the last Farm, I did a performance piece. Was actually, I think I presented this at one of the virtual Agda meetings, but those didn't see it. We took one of the theorems from the straight paper, and this theorem, the soundless theorem, and used reflection to convert it into music. So I took some of the music that I had written for previous Farm submissions and used it as kind of Wagnerian leitmotifs. And I won't, kind of go into this, but I can play a little bit of this for you to see what it sounds like. It wasn't all that, for me personally, it wasn't all that great. I did play for some UW people when I gave a practice talk for this, and at least one of them liked it, so I'll hear a little bit. So there are different levels of the proof, and then things would speed up as they go down to lower levels and stuff. So anyway, that was that. All right, but so you and I also worked on trying to extend the counterpoint into more complicated things, and we ran into some problems. Or it kind of got harder and harder, and I actually presented this at some previous Agda meeting, I forget which one. And I remember Andreas telling me, why don't you just write your own type system, for counterpoint, and I kind of resisted. I wanted to take advantage of Agda's one, but then I tried it out, and it actually wasn't, too bad. So this is kind of what I did this time. There are a lot of advantages to it. It could be more flexible. We could get better error messages and so forth. So this is what I worked on. And then the other thing is I wanted to do synthesis as well. So I've been learning about SMT solvers, and it seemed like, why not just not analyze counterpoint, but we could create our own. So I originally did this in Haskell, because Haskell has a really nice SPV library, really high quality connection to that. And one of the things, if you want to do both analysis and synthesis, you have to kind of use the rules in two different ways, right? You have to use them for the analysis, in which case you want kind of normal integers, and then for synthesis you want these symbolic integers and things like that. So with Haskell, I tried doing it using type classes just to see, and it worked, but it wasn't that great. And then the other obvious thing to do is kind of create a little DSL for the low-level language, and then interpret it both ways. And then that's what I did for the AGDA approach. So I did it in Haskell, which was fine, but then I really missed AGDA, and I thought, oh, why not? Before I get too far into it, why not translate it over and then just use Haskell inside the FFI. And then I could connect it with my old music tool stuff and use all that, which was nice. And also I got much nicer, notation and so forth. So I think this is cleaner than it would have looked in AGDA, since you can use mixtex and Unicode, two things I really love. So anyway, so what I did for this is I analyzed this exercise that Beethoven did when he studied with Haydn. And this is discussed more in the form video. But basically, Beethoven studied counterpoint under Haydn, and Haydn was using this text called Gradas ad Parnassum, Steps to Parnassus. Parnassus is where the muses live, and if you made it up there, you'd be a great artist. And it basically gave rules for counterpoint. So just to kind of explain, counterpoint is you have multiple kind of melodies, and you want them to each be interesting, but you want them to also interact in some interesting way. So, so here, what Haydn did was he wrote the top line of music, so all the stuff in the upper staff here that have their stems pointing upwards, and then this was denoted CF for cantus firmus. And Beethoven's task is to write the other three lines and have them interact with this in good ways. So the basic, there are a bunch of different rules for this. This is first species counterpoint, which is note against note. You can also have second species where you have two notes for every one note of the cantus firmus, and then there are more complicated ones as well. But this was a first species four-part exercise that Beethoven did, and the basic rules are you want these intervals between the notes to be consonant, so it sounds nice. And Beethoven satisfied this. He did everything as triad. So if you don't read music, it's fine. But if you do read it, this is C, E, G, C. So this is a C triad. The next one is A, C, and a C, E. So that's A minor triad, and so forth. So we've got the consonants rule. So consonants basically said things had to be a major, minor, third, which this is major, minor, sixth. Fifths and octaves are allowed. So here's a fifth here. Here's an octave here. Fourths are normally not allowed in second species counterpoint. This is a fourth, but it's allowed, or first species counterpoint with two voices, but it's allowed in more voices. So he has a fourth here. It's okay, but it's considered kind of a weird interval. And then the second kind of rule you want is you want the lines to be relatively independent. So they should be moving in different ways, right? You don't want too much parallel motion. So here we got some parallel motion, right? Which is okay because it's sixths, but you don't want parallel motion with fifths or octaves in it because those are extremely consonant intervals, and it will sound like the lines are not independent. And so contrary motion is very good where you're going different ways, or oblique motion where one is the same and the other is changing. So this is oblique motion here, for example. That one is the same. All right? So any questions then? So I can play this, hopefully it will work. You can hear. So, pretty nice, nothing special, but it turns out there's an error in this according to the rules. So I said you couldn't have parallel motion in the fifths and octaves, or also even similar motion. So this is motion from a sixth into a fifth here, so this is considered wrong in in first species rules. And then he also had a second error, and then he went from a fifth to an octave in similar motion. So these are called direct fifths and direct octaves, or hidden fifths and hidden octaves. And they're considered bad. But, you know, I mean, it's maybe a little hard to hear it. We can just listen to this part. You know, especially with all the voices, it doesn't sound that bad, but Haydn actually corrected it and said this should go up here. That fixes both the problems. So now we have contrary motion here, and we have oblique motion there. So you can hear what the corrected one sounds like. I don't know. My ears are not good enough to hear that much of a difference, but, you know, slight improvement. Anyway, so we wanted to basically, you know, capture these rules, see if we could analyze this piece and others like it, and then, you know, also synthesize a counterpoint that satisfies the rules. So, you know, the interface I really want for this is this Muse score, which is a free software for writing music. But, you know, I wanted to have something where you could, like, select the notes, send it off to Agda, get the response, and then, you know, mark up the errors or whatever. And in a previous, one of the virtual meetings, I think Orestes and I worked a little bit on this, but it's a mess. You have this huge QML thing that's completely undocumented, and we got something that kind of worked. You know, at least you could send data Agda and back, but it wasn't that much interesting. I still want to work on this. I think it's important, but I'm going to wait. So MuseScore is updating to a new version, and it's even more undocumented, and I don't know what they changed, so I'm going to kind of wait till that settles down, but I do want to get back to that. But for now, you got to do the, you know, the hard work of entering this yourself. So this is, can everyone see? Big enough? So basically, this is what it looks like. So C5 is middle C, according to the MIDI standard, and then just enter in all the notes. All right, so let's analyze this now. So first of all, in the farm talk, I only looked at the first two lines. I extended this to handle more lines, which is what I'll show today. But let's look at that first. So so basically, these are the constraints, and this is pure Agda here, and it's actually pretty readable, which I was happy with. But I also have a pretty printed version, which is even more readable. So let's look at that. So basically, these are the constraints that I put on for this, and it's pretty flexible what constraints you want to use. So first of all, I said everything had to be in the scale. And then it also has a location thing where you can find where the constraints are applied. And then also everything has to be in one of these, you know, good consonant intervals, right? And maybe just to, you know, hear what might go wrong if we did a bad interval. Let's see. Right, I mean, it doesn't sound great, right? So already that's kind of a clear rule. We changed the octave to a 7. All right, and then I have these other constraints that the intervals can't be too big, and this is actually a pretty weak constraint. It should be stronger, but I only did this very recently. And then you can't have direct motion into perfect intervals. So direct motion is either parallel motion or similar motion. And you know, again, these constraints could be satisfied or not, but they're all just listed there. Okay. All right. So then, what we can do is we can compile these constraints into this intermediate language, and I'll show you what that looks like. It's not super pretty, but it's about, you know, basically just compiling things down to integers and a bunch of things, and I can show you what the language looks like. It's very, very simple. integers and booleans. I want something that would be, obviously translatable into SMT clauses and so forth. So one interesting thing with those, you can have variables here, which of course will be solved for when you do synthesis. And then there's a little like a school evaluator. And you can see I have a kind of sloppy type system here. So I didn't want to do maybes with variables, so I just set it to -999. Maybe there's a better way to do that without having these maybes, but I'll let you guys let me know. All right, so then we go back. What we can do is we can compile the constraints, evaluate them, and anything not satisfied is an error, right? So let's look at that. Oops, let's look at the pre-printed version. All right, so we have motion from voice 1, beat 5 to beat 6, and you can do voice bar beat 2 if once it gets longer, you don't want to count the beats, but I just did it for beats for now. We have motion to perfect 5th and perfect 8th, and that's exactly, if I put this back where it was, that's exactly these two errors, so here, here, and here. All right, so that's, and then you can, I also, in the farm talk, I showed how you could put a variable there in that area and then synthesize it and get something similar. But now let's since then I allowed you to do multiple voices, not just two. So let's take a look at this now. So the whole piece. And let's look at the errors here. All right. Oh, look at this. There's actually a ton of errors now. And a lot of, direct motion in perfect intervals. And there's also an error here. This is interesting too, right? You normally don't want a unison. Although again, it's kind of okay. You also don't want voice crossing, so the unison happens right here, right? Again, some of these things you want kind of to be softer errors and stuff like that. So, but anyway, it turned out there were a bunch of different errors. So why did Haydn only highlight this one when there are actually tons of different errors? And the reason is partly that errors in certain voices are worse than others. So if you look at the errors here, most of these are between inner voices. Well, I guess it's not always. So we have stuff between voice 1 beat 8 and voice 3 beat 9. So that's here and here. Right, so there's, looks like there's some kind of motion into a perfect interval there. How bad is that? And then there's also even the question, can you even, do something that satisfies all these constraints at all? So, so I actually tried to synthesize this. Let me tell you a little bit about the synthesis. So basically, so to do the synthesis, I just have a foreign function module here. This is something I ran into too. I had to duplicate the data types. Maybe I asked the experts if there's a better way to do this. So you can only do compile GHC for types in the same module. I didn't want to I wanted to make all my modules safe if they could be, so I want all this stuff in safe code, so I didn't want to define it here, so I duplicated it and then had to copy it. And so there's a thing that converts the safe version into the one in this module, and then you get another Haskell version of it, so it's kind of free versions of the same data structure. And then another, this is the thing that compiles it into SVT expressions, and then basically you run it on Z3. All right. So the thing about doing synthesis too is now everything, before we could do everything at type check time because it was all pure, but here maybe I could use exec_tc or something. I haven't tried that out yet, but I just compile it. So I have a main function here. It's pretty simple. You just do your music here. There's a thing that does make variables, so you can replace some of the notes with variables for depending on how you want to, what you want to leave out, and then the solve to MIDI thing, and then it converts it actually into MIDI code, and I can open it in MuseScore and look at it. So you can compile this. It takes kinds of tens of seconds to compile it. For 2 lines, it takes maybe hundreds of seconds to run, but then as you get up to 4 lines, it gets up to maybe 4 seconds or something, so it definitely slows down with the SMT solver. I won't do that for you, but what I found is when I try to, I did the boundaries have special rules, so I haven't implemented those yet, so I just left Beethoven's boundaries the same and tried to fill in the rest, satisfying all these constraints, right? So only constant intervals, perfect fourths are okay, only notes in the scale, no direct fifths and octaves, and I couldn't find a solution. So maybe there's no way to do it. Maybe I have a bug, I don't know. But I could do it with 3 lines. There's also constraints you can put on to make the music more interesting. So I have these interesting constraints. I can show you the counterpoint rules. So basically, the first species constraints, I had these. These are the ones I showed you up here. So you have to be within the right intervals. You can't have too big of an interval, and then no direct motion into perfects. And then there's the other one with scale constraints, which is up there, and then I combine those 2 together. And then interesting constraints were things like you want a lot of contrary motion, so the number of things of contrary motion has to be at least 6, and then there shouldn't be too many leaps because that kind of makes the melodies look bad. But anyway, I ran this even without the interesting constraints. You can kind of get lucky. I had one here which I saved because there's a little bit of non-determinism with the SMT solver. You get different results each time, or if you change anything, even tiny. But I got 3 voices, I got a solution. So this Can's Firmus is the same as Haydn's, and then the other 2 lines, only Beethoven's notes at the beginning. Yeah, and the rest was all synthesized. And this is actually, sounds pretty good, so. To me, and even if you listen to the individual lines of this, this is the Cantus Firmus. So Haydn picked a nice melody there to start with, but then here's the middle voice. The middle voice doesn't have to be that interesting, but it's actually not too bad for a middle voice. Too bad, and then if we look at the lower voice. The lower voice should be fairly interesting. So not bad. So I would have been pretty happy to come up with this, and this was entirely synthesized just using the rules. So, so that's kind of where I'm at now. I still haven't done the higher species yet. I want to do that next. And add in some boundary, add in more conditions and so forth. But I'm pretty happy with at least the general framework now, so I can start building on it. All right, so that's the main things I want to talk about. Any questions or anything? Yes?
Maybe the rather obvious question from this community, why don't you make your expressions well scoped?
Expressions well scoped.
Because you don't need this quickness, the minus 9,990.
So what would how would it change if it was well scoped? You mean I'd have like I'd have integers and then I'd have a separate thing that's either integer or variable, or?
No, you make I expression indexed by the number of variables.
Okay.
And then var doesn't take a string, but a fin, like so if you say I expression n, then variable is taking a fin n, so
Or you
I
could-
expression n.
Or you could have a list of names as the index and then prove that the name is in this list.
Yeah, those are the use instead. But then you can restrict your evaluation function to closed expressions by simply setting this index to 0. In the other file you have this minus 900.
Okay. Good. All right. Now that sounds like a good idea. Let me see if I can do that, and I'll ask you if I get stuck. So, yeah, thanks. Any other? Yeah, I mean, definitely. The reason I present here is I want suggestions for improvements. So I haven't shown you much of the code,
But do you actually share variables? Like let's say we had a lambda abstraction, then you would need to do this trick. But now you just keep them as placeholders, right?
Right.
So, like even if this was just a whole, like nothing, unit, somehow you would be able to run the SMT solver, but just saying, produce a unique identifier for all of my holes and give me numbers back. Or maybe I misunderstood how this works.
So sorry.
Is this notion of variable the same as in lambda calculus, or something similar?
No, it's just just a placeholder. I mean, it has to have a unique name, which I also don't, force here. So if there's an easy way to do that without a lot of overhead, I'd be curious in that as well. Now I just, trust the user to give unique names for all the variables. Yeah.
So it seems like you have like a 12 silicon scale. And,
Yes.
And implicitly you use some tuning, which probably is called temperament.
Yeah, I assume equal temperament and all that
So
stuff.
my understanding is that like not every fits with sound moves in such a tuning by issue of physical constraints. And so do you have some like SNT constraints that prevent some fifths to appear or other? And or do you care about tuning at all? As a input?
No, I mean, the fifths, are not as pure as, real fifths, but they're good enough.
Right.
So they're still considered. Even though equal temperament was just kind of starting around the time of Hux, the fifths were still considered, bad even if they were equal tempered fifths. So we don't. And I don't know if you're saying, should fifths and twelfths be treated separately or something like that, but I think they're all treated the same. And I just, if you have bigger intervals, I just do mod 12. So
Right. So you ignore tuning.
No, this whole library assumes equal temperament. I haven't been interested in extending it past that yet. Yeah. Hmm? Yes.
So for the more interesting kind of generation, what you may only start now, are you planning to generate something which may actually be like well typed, sounds better, like more interesting, or like can you do something like which almost just like I don't know.
Well, that's that's the whole nice thing about this is it's not exactly a black and white, right? It's not, type checks are not. So what this is doing is it's saying, okay, here's all the constraints you want, here's all the ones that are violated, now what do you want to do with that? And you can, of course, because ACT is dependently typed, I can take all these constraints and just put them up into the type, right, and make it an extra condition on it. But you could also, as with the entry constraints, you can say, okay, you're allowed to violate this up to a certain number of times, right? Then that's okay. And in practice, this has kind of been like an iterative experience. You kind of do it, you see, okay, well, that doesn't quite sound right. I need to add some more constraints and so forth. But maybe you can also try to automate this in some respect. And one thing I haven't yet taken advantage of that I want to is Z3 allows you to do constrained optimization, right? So you can say, okay, here's a bunch of soft constraints, and I want to maximize some objective function. And so that'd be nice to play with. But for now, I kind of did, for these saying like, I want 6 instances of contrary motion, I just kind of handed it and said, okay, well 7 doesn't work, so 6 must be the best. So, but yeah, absolutely. And I think this is maybe an interesting idea, even going back to, programming languages. The type theory community would it be interesting to have these type systems that is not just black and white, but has a little bit of range of what's acceptable. And I don't know exactly how one would specify that. If such a thing existed, this would be a good use case.